It's just time as Steeler fans that we have that conversation that we've needed to have for a couple years now. The edge position in general, it needs addressed. It needs addressed. And I think there's one name that no one wants to say, but is it time to trade TJ Watt?
Yeah, the thing that needs addressed on the Steelers roster is their best position group. Absolutely. That's what we should be talking about right now. Welcome back to lucky episode 7 of Out of Town Yinzers. I'm Joe alongside Justin. We're talking Steelers, Pirates, Pens, and Pitt. Crack a beer, sip a latte. Justin, let's jump right into it.
All right, let's jump into the rundown here. First, with the Steelers, we're going to go over a bold Steelers move that I would make, and then we'll cover the first couple mocks. It's mock season, so the first couple mocks are out. Jumping into the Pirates, we'll go over some actual concerns. We've been real nice and rosy on the Pirates, so it's time to maybe get a little bit of the other side of the coin. We'll run through the Olympics, how they've gone so far in hockey, talk on a trade rumor. And then with Pitt, we'll jump into the athletic director letter that came out a few weeks ago. And then we'll jump into a new segment. We do have a new segment we're going to be adding tonight. And moving forward, we're going to start doing some drafts. Everyone likes to draft. It's draft season, so we're going to jump into a new draft segment that we're going to hopefully get some viewer feedback on, and we're going to have a little bet that, and we're going to keep standings on that. So we want you as viewers to get involved, and we want you guys to vote on who you think had a better list. And there will be a punishment, like I mentioned, at the end of the standings, probably like later this summer.
So jumping right into the Steelers, kind of off the cuff, you said that we had a kind of a big move aspect. It really is you that has that big move. You said you want to get rid of TJ Watt. Why are you running off a Hall of Famer?
So this, to take a step back before you once again make my take for me, I think this, objectively, everyone I think should agree on this. There's a real serious conversation that needs to be had about the edge, the position for the Steelers. They have great depth there. Of all the positions that have great depth at, that's certainly a good position to have the depth. I think there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had. Now, you know this is not a new take for me. I've had this take for the last 2 years. Now, I think some people might think, especially new viewers may not know that I've hinted at this. I think it's time to make a big decision here on TJ Watt. Is it TJ Watt? Is it Highsmith? There's a real conversation that needs to be had. If you've been following the last couple of weeks, Herbig has come out and said directly that he wants to be a starter. He does not want to be a part-time player. So I think there's a very real conversation that needs to be had. And I think, honestly, he has a fair gripe on wanting to be an every down player. Just to walk through it, I want everyone to have the facts here before we get into our little back and forth. We'll just run through each of the position for the Steelers. So TJ Watt, he turns 32 in October, so this is his 32 age season. He's got 3 years and anywhere from 42 to 46 million per year left on his contract. So it'll be 42, 46 is actually how it breaks down. Now it's football, so the numbers they can fudge those numbers, things like that. If they move him, there are certain ways they can move him with a pre or post June 1st designation. They'll save about $32 million against the cap each of those seasons. So there'll be like a $10 million cap hit the first year. I think it's either a 10 the second and the third, or a 20 the second. Either way, those numbers can be fudged a little bit. But that is a real thing. There is a real cap savings there. The good news, though, with that is a team would be getting Watt on a very, realistic, very doable 30-ish million for an edge rusher. You can, and that is tradable. So that's worth noting. Highsmith is similar. He's 29, so he's kind of when I started having the conversation about TJ Watt, that's where he's at. His deal, 2 years, 20 to 21 million. And there's a $15 million savings against the cap each of the next 2 years. So that's what the team inheriting them, or either player in a trade would be trade. Those are great deals. If you can get one of those two, a contending team on those deals. So those are tradable. We'll talk in a second here on what the return will look like now versus maybe if they had done one of these deals in the past. And then Herbig and Sawyer, the other two, we just touched on Herbig. I think he's a starter at this point. I think I really want to see. I'm interested to see next year. Every down player, what he can do. And these guys are on entry level deals. They're 1.3, I think, per year, each of them. Now Herbig will be coming up. This is his last year in his deal. Sawyer's got 3 years, so there's some good depth there. You could move one of these edge players. I just think, to me, with their window. Now again, we have different viewpoints on where the Steelers are. You're ready to plan the parade next year. I'm ready to build around some of the young pieces and look to the future. I think the window could start, if they do everything right, the window starts in 2 years. That's why, to me, I think you make a decision on either TJ Watt or Highsmith, and the reason being their age, and they don't line up with your window. So you trade one of the two of them, depending on the return. You could argue maybe TJ Watt, maybe Highsmith, because the return might be better for Highsmith with his age. I think if you can get a day 2 pick out of TJ Watt, I think you move on for him, no questions asked. So that's kind of my overall view. I have some other thoughts, but I want to get your take on that. Since you're ready to, like I said, ready to plan the parade. I can understand if you view the Steelers as competing. I get it. Like, I would not be wanting to move TJ Watt. That's the same reason I think there is a competing team that may want him. But just based on the players alone, what's your I'm sure it's going to be different. What's your rebuttal to that?
Well, first off, it's just kind of an outrageous take. It's very much a Steelery take right now. It's saying, hey, let's rebuild in the NFL. Let's get rid of these people. Let's get all this cap space. Then what the hell are you going to do with it? So you got this cap space. What are you going to use it on? Are you going to go buy Alex Pierce in the offseason? Like, there just aren't those players that you're going to spend in free agency for when you think about it. So let's go back the way that you were talking about it in general. I feel like the argument of cap space is a false one. Cap space doesn't matter to the Steelers until they have a quarterback that is off of their rookie deal of a quarterback. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. They can always make the salary cap work, no matter their team construction. But when you kind of go player by player, again, TJ Watt is someone who is going to be that one helmet guy unless he pushes off. There is value to that. I'm telling you that from a culture standpoint, that you do want the good players to stay around. There's no reason to shake them off. So you're going to trade off TJ Watt for a day 2 pick. Okay, so we now traded TJ Watt for Roman Wilson, and now we have more cap space of about $15 million. So we have an extra $15 million in Roman Wilson. That's going to help us. Highsmith would be of the two who you would move off of, but it doesn't have to be this offseason. They don't have any cap issues, so you don't have to make any cap casualties. Highsmith is going to be an obvious cut candidate when it comes to next season. I think, too, when it comes down to Nick Herbig, him actually being on the field more is a real thing. I just think it's going to happen naturally next season anyways. When you have a new defensive coordinator, he's being able to watch Nick Herbig play. You talked about Patrick Graham, about how he's someone who, models his defense off of the players that are on his roster and not just have a defense that he kind of pigeonholes people into. So I think Nick Herbig is going to play plenty of snaps to be, a starter type guy next season. And Highsmith is the one that I would say you'd want to move off of, but man, he played really well down the stretch too. So it's just hard to say, okay, we finally have the best position group on our whole team. You have 4 players that are legit NFL roster guys. You have the depth. You don't have to touch that position at all. And all of a sudden, we're going to start farming out 1 or 2 guys and create a position of need where you don't need one.
So, okay, let me unpack this for a second here. Roman Wilson, would Nick Eamon-Morey look good in a Steelers uniform right now? Because that's who they gave. That's who was taken with the pick they traded away last year.
Were they going to take him, or were they going to take?
I don't disagree, but if
Keanu
we're going to look,
because he's been awesome.
If we're going to, again, my point though is if we're going to say Roman Wilson, we got to look at the other end of the spectrum with what those picks could have become. Like, of course, it could become Roman Wilson, who I still don't know if he's alive or not. I still have not. I'm not sure. But it could become Nick Eamon-Morey, who they traded, the pick away, and he looks real good in a Seahawks jersey right now. I get what you're saying on the second round pick, or the second, or the day 2 pick though.
It wouldn't even be a second round pick, and I think you know that too. I think it would probably be a third.
Well, and that's why the question comes down to. I do agree. I saw someone online saying a first. Like, there's no way they're getting a first for a 32-year-old guy that's making $40 million coming off of an injury. So here's the rest of the argument. So the one helmet guy, that is such a 70s old time way of thinking with the Steelers. That's exactly the way of thinking with the Steelers. I get it, but it's the and there is something to be said for that. I'm not discounting that. You could make the argument that I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth because I've been saying the same thing about Kutch and the Penguins. It's different though in a capped league one. It's different with Kutch just in general because he's, end of his career. Money isn't really an issue either way, or shouldn't be an issue either way with that. Penguins is very different. Last time I checked, how many playoff games has Watt won with the Steelers?
Yeah, that's probably entirely his fault that he hasn't won.
No, completely agree. My point is the bigger point I'm trying to make is it's not this. I'm making the point against what I would counter myself with and saying, well, you're saying Malkin can play out his career. They've won 3 cups. It's a very different situation with the Penguins than it is with Watt here. They failed Watt. I want to be very clear on that. The Steelers front office failed Watt and has failed Watt throughout his career. It has 100% nothing to do with TJ Watt, the reason that he has not won playoff games in Pittsburgh. Not at all his fault. But my point is, it is a different scenario than with the Penguins. I'm making the point that I would make, or countering the point I would make against myself. So the thing I do want to point out, though, is, and to me, I'm not, the reason I was pointing out the cap was, I do agree with you. It's not like the Steelers are up against the cap where they need to be worried about it. It's more the cap savings and not so much the cap savings. The cap hit the team would need to take on if they trade for him. It is palatable with these 2 players because of that. So that was the main reason I was pointing it out. I don't disagree with what you're saying about them not worrying about the cap, because you're right. Until they've got a max, at least middle of the road quarterback demanding middle of the road money, it really doesn't matter too much with the cap. It matters, but to your point, you create a hole. I would argue a little bit. I push back a little bit on the hole, because if you have either Watt or Highsmith, Herbig, and Sawyer, it's still a pretty solid, position. And to be fair, they're number 1 in defensive spending against the cap in the league by a wide margin, and they are not getting number 1 or top 5 or even top 10 production out of their defense. So to look at the players, though, overall, the argument may be against is you got Max Crosby, Hendrickson, both could be dealt this offseason. But if you zoom out a little bit, the Raiders, the Bengals, the Browns, those are the 3 teams I think that should all be moving edges for some reason or not, and they're doing the same thing the Steelers are. 29 to 31-year-old edge players. I have no idea why the Raiders haven't moved Crosby. I think they're going to. And I don't know what the Bengals were doing halfway through last season, not moving Hendrick. You get a 3rd or 4th round pick, you move him in a dead season. So anyway, and then today, Bradley Chubb gets cut by the Dolphins. Look at Bradley Chubb's production compared to TJ Watt's. Over the last 2 years, with Bradley Chubb, he didn't play in 24. His 23 and 25 numbers are almost identical to TJ Watt. And that's a team that's cutting. Now, the Dolphins have their own issues, but that's a team that's cutting that player. So, and he's actually younger than TJ Watt by a year or 2. But that's I think, this isn't so much to you, but I think people have this idea that like TJ Watt has this crazy value. And you could honestly make the argument now that he isn't going to get you enough of a return. So maybe you do keep him. But I think the conversation.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think he has a lot of value out there. I think he has more value to the Steelers than he does anywhere else.
And that would be an argument why I might look at maybe not making the same mistake twice. And not that Highsmith has the same value right now as TJ Watt did 2-3 years ago. But we need to finally bite the bullet, if I'm the Steelers front office, and plan for the future for the first time in 6 years. It's always been these little Band-Aids, and like we talked about many times, they've been making decisions to the floor. So there's some moves that I think need to be made. I'd build around the 4 or 5 key players you have on defense right now and maximize their window, not maximize the window this year or next year. So I think it's time for them as an organization to finally be forward thinking and start looking at how are we the best team we can be 2 to 3 years, because I think that's the real window. So that's, again, it could be TJ Watt, it could be Highsmith. You could convince me. We don't know what the return is. We can guess. We don't know, but I think you move one of them, you get the draft capital you can, and you're better off for it 2 years from now. Which, again, to me, that's the real window.
Yeah. I mean, they already have 12 picks and a bunch of cap space. Like, I feel like they already have the maneuverability over the next 12 months to reshape a roster that you don't have to do these drastic moves. We talked before the podcast, and it kind of morphed into like you were kind of trying to box me in the corner. What is your Steelers' big move? And really, I don't think there is a big move they have to make. I feel like a lot of the moves they've been making to have this kind of roster turnover have already been in place. And really, we're kind of in the, sixth, seventh inning of that already. And one of those rosters that comes into focus a little bit more with just a couple players, a quarterback, obviously a little bit more on offense, things of that nature. But at the same time, I don't think you get better by subtracting. I think you can make the argument for me for Alex Highsmith, but TJ Watt is one that it's hard to understand what you're gaining by removing him from your team and roster.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to us viewing, like, to me, if you don't have a window to really advance in the playoffs, like what, and we just view the roster a little different, which is fair. Like I would be making the argument you're making if I viewed them as like, oh, I think they can do something in the playoffs. I don't, it's not this isn't a TJ Watt thing. This is really more of like a roster management thing for me. So we probably just view the roster slightly different, which is fair, is fine.
Yeah. So your plan is instead, let's make our team worse, and then we'll be good to go. I get it.
Yeah, in the short term, yes, but great. So we win 7-8 games instead, and we get a higher pick. And if we would have done that a year ago, oh no, maybe we actually can get one of these top 3 receivers that we're probably going to miss out on these guys as a result. Why are we banging our head against the wall to maybe we sneak into the playoffs? When you have I like the core. I like the core of players they have. You're just going to need some top end talent and certainly a quarterback to do anything with it. The longer we wait, the longer the Porters and the Harmons and the Herbigs, we're losing their prime the longer we push it out.
Flipping from the TJ Watt aspect to the draft, which is kind of the whole aspect of that. I'll give you one caveat before we move off. If you could actually get a top 45 pick for a TJ Watt, you can consider it. But if it's only something
and they're not, I don't think they are, by
if
the
it's
way, to
over
your point.
60, if it's something in the third round, that's just not a place where you're going to likely find high-end talent. I mean, there's definitely a lot of players that are there. They have 3 picks already. It's the same reason why I would say last year trading George Pickens for a third round pick wasn't a good deal. Even though it kind of made sense in some ways with the roster construction and things of that nature. But, it's just, you're trading away known quantities for, you know, just the hit rate on a third round pick is just not that great.
And to be like, that made even less sense because it was like, why did you just trade like the sum of the parts? And we don't need to we've already touched on that. That just doesn't make sense. But yeah, it's not, to me, it's what you can't just look at it as do we hit or do we not? It's the total picture. We'll go over the mock in a second here. I'm happy the Steelers beat the Ravens, but I sure would like to have a top 15 pick and have a shot at one of these top 3 receivers. And maybe 1 or 2 of these picks allows you to do that, to get up into those top 3 receivers. But to me, those top 3 receivers, there's a little bit of a gap there. And they could use one of those guys.
That is for sure. There is a clear top 3 receiver group right now. That is, your typical Ohio State receiver who's going to be great, Carnell Tate. You have Mekhi Lemon and then Jordan Tyson as well.
Yeah, Tyson.
So,
yep.
Those are definitely the top 3 guys. I think to your point though, like there's enough draft capital, they could move up and get one of those if they wanted to.
Yep.
They moved up for Broderick Jones as opposed to just sticking and picking, at that draft.
Yeah,
So I don't
Christian
think it'll
Gonzalez,
even. Yeah, I don't even think it'll take that much to move up to one of those, but there is a huge drop off. You can kind of see it in the mock drafts that are coming out.
I think there could be a scenario where they need to make them. It depends on, it really depends on how the draft can go so many different ways, and we'll start having a better idea. But there is a scenario where in order to get one of these 3, they may need to make a move that resembles more of like the Devin Bush move, where they move from a similar spot up to closer to 10. It really just depends on how the draft plays out. But yeah, to run through these, you were kind of touching on it. We went through, we looked at 6 of the mock drafts. Like you mentioned, Daniel Jeremiah. These are the main names: McShay, Kuiper, Jeremiah, Klatt, Yates, and then PFF mock. 2 of them had Ty Simpson. I've kind of said my early thoughts on him. Like you mentioned, 2 of them had Denzel Boston. McShay did have Jordan Tyson. I don't think he's going to be there. That would be a dream scenario, really, at this point for the Steelers. But we'll see as we get closer. And then Caden Proctor by PFF. I don't know. Tackle. I think the takeaway here, it's very obvious that it's going to be offense. I'd be shocked if they didn't go offense at this point. It's funny. Like, we thought it was pretty clear offense was the need last year. They used 1 pick in the first 5 rounds on offense last year. So I think that there's going to be a changing of the guard with it's natural, I think, for defensive head coaches to lean that way. I think you're going to see a changing of the guard when it comes to that. And it's very clear with these picks.
Like, hindsight, Harmon's a good player. He's going to be could be a great player. But gosh, almighty, that's what I was saying. It's like, man, you really just got to take your swings at quarterback. That's why I'm not going to be mad at any point if they take a quarterback this year, because I don't know quarterbacks that well. Not many people know quarterbacks that well. That's why there's so many, hits and misses. But
right.
Damn, if you would have had either Jackson Dart or even Tyler Shuck right now, you would just feel not like warm and fuzzy about the Steelers, but you would feel different.
When you make those picks, you kind of have to just, plug your nose and just make the pick. Sometimes it feels bad in the moment. And then that next offseason, you're like, oh man, this feels amazing. So it is amazing how 6 months, or like 3 or 4 months once they start the season, how things can look just completely. Like, look at the Giants now. They went from being maybe a bottom 10 position in the league. They wouldn't have Harbaugh right now if they didn't make that pick. That job in general, that whole front office looks different after you make that pick. So there's high risk, high reward with those quarterbacks early. But yeah, I would have been, we talked about this. I would have been fine with any of the. Ekbuka was another one we had talked about that you liked earlier. But they just got to take your point another step. They just got to start taking some swings on offense in general.
Yeah, 1,000%. So a lot more to come for the Steelers as the offseason progresses. We will continue to be on different sides of the next stages of the Steelers. I think Justin's going to be your typical Steelers take, and I'll try to keep all of your Steelers fans on the straight and narrow of what we should be thinking about for 2026. But at the same time, let's talk about another rosy team in Pittsburgh. From my perspective, the Pirates. The Pirates actually, after the Ozuna signing, have the 6th best odds in the National League to make the playoffs at over 40%. That's more than double what they were last year. But Justin's still not sold.
I've been listening to Mr. Pirate here for a little over a month, and I'll be honest with you. I'm almost there. I'm getting more optimistic. I agree with you on a lot of the takes that you've made. I just want a little bit of a reality check, and let's look at if things don't go right this year, why they might not go right. So we want to be realistic. We want to just look at both sides of this with the Pirates. You got me almost there, but I'm like it's just you see the same thing so many times with the Pirates. You're like, I don't know if I'm ready to be hurt yet. So that's really the really where I'm at. But so let's look at both short term and long term. The way I look at it, I want to have a realistic take here, maybe the other side. So short term, I think the pessimistic way to look at it short term is they did about the bare minimum within the acceptable range. When you consider, like you said, moving deck chairs around, to use your term, the Bednar and Hayes moves kind of set them up to make some of these moves this year. My overall take is this should be a normal offseason. This isn't really specific to this year, but this should be a normal offseason for a major league team, even a middle of the road to lower end payroll major league team. So short term, that's kind of my skeptical, realistic take. Long term, and I know we want to get into this, but it's just still so hard to trust management. Were these moves just them front running the CBA agreement that's coming up? None of these deals are true commitments. No one's really signed past 27. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I am a little bit worried. Is this them trying, kind of like we talked about before? Is it more of a PR move, but also maybe a move to appease the league a little bit? So that's just more of my long-term concern. Again, to get into this season, I want to focus on this season a little bit more. I understand. We talked about last week. I understand why the moves were made. They may be missed on some of the moves that would have filled direct needs and maybe at a higher level for a lot more money, obviously. But I think they addressed the things they needed to address given the opportunities they had. One thing that we do need, it is real. This isn't fantasy baseball. I do think we need to talk about the defense. I saw the GIF the other day of like the Pirates signing, and it's like it was like a bobsled team. Everyone's trying to jump into the bobsled, and it's like them trying to add all these DHs into the lineup. Again, I get it. I'm happy they did it. But to look at it realistically, PNC's left field isn't getting any smaller. Left field is not going to be easy to. Yeah, it should. Yeah, wouldn't be the worst thing.
Put Alan Green in charge. He'll make that shorter.
Oh yeah, We'll get to that. So that's real. Cruz in center field. We're ready for. You were mentioning a Gold Glove season, and the off season. He certainly trained to the position. It's real. It is real. He hasn't. He's going to need to be really good in center field. So the outfield is a concern. That's one way things could go bad. There could be some embarrassing moments and some tough games in the outfield, especially at PNC. You can only hide Brian Reynolds or one outfielder in right field at PNC. And then third base. It's not a concern, but they could, I guess technically they could still address this, but that left side of the infield is thin. Griffin almost has to start, it seems like, if they don't make a move at shortstop, but so these are just some of the concerns, some of the ways that things could go. If they go bad, it could be because of this. We talked a little bit before we jumped on. Can the bullpen hold up? There's just so much variance, volatility with the bullpen. If things go, they aren't a big spending team to where they can just all of a sudden fix an issue. So if they spring a leak in the bullpen, that's another way things could go wrong. So they do have a lot riding on the starting pitching, rightfully so. It's a great rotation. That's again, it almost has to be. I feel like for the sixth odds for them to make the playoffs, it has to be what we think it is, which I think it will. I really do think it will. But I would argue they were better defensively last year. You trade Hayes. It's not nothing. I'm not saying I think it was the right move, but these things do matter. We're not playing fantasy baseball. Defense does matter. I think they're certainly better. I am not saying they're not better than they were last year. It's just there's some past. There could be some issues. So I'm almost there. You've almost got me there. I just want to point out some things that do concern me. Then on top of it, Ozuna and Reynolds, we just talked about age in football. They're not getting any younger. There's past to where, the hip injury with Ozuna and last year wasn't a mirage, and, Reynolds in the field becomes more of a concern. There's certainly could go the other way. But if things don't go the way we hope this year, I think it's going to be something within this list we just ran.
Yeah, I think that's a fair list. I think when it comes down to it, I asked you about this year, so I don't really care about the CBA aspect.
Yeah.
That kind of, I'm more excited about that than I am worried about it from a Pirates fan perspective, though. I do think the roster flexibility is going to be something that Don Kelly's going to have to manage throughout the season. But you need the bats in there when it comes down to it. I love Connor Griffin so much. I think people are still sleeping on him even more so, even though Fangraphs had the most glowing write-up on him as their number one prospect that I have ever read out of a prospect. They referenced Mean Joe Green in the write-up.
Really?
Connor Griffin is going to be the Mean Joe Green for the Pirates. He's going to make Paul Skeens look like the second best Pirate in short order in Pittsburgh. Like
Wow,
that's the type of things that they're saying about Connor Griffin right now. And there's actually one video that I was watching. I love spring training videos talked about last week, but there was a video that I was watching today where he was doing batting practice, sure, just batting practice, but it was so cool to see him hit these bombs, and then you didn't see where the ball was going, but you could just hear it hitting the roof out in left field multiple times, like probably like 30 seconds later, because you knew they were moonshots. So he's just someone that's just a difference maker when it comes down to it. The other thing too is that the Pirates, we can give them a lot of shade, but Ben Cherington really has turned the roster over completely in 3 years or 2 years. So in 2023, there was only 3 players on the opening day roster that are still with the Pirates today. Do you know who they are?
about to say who are they.
Go ahead, give
Well,
it a guess.
Reynolds is one of them.
Reynolds is one.
Um, is there a catcher?
Nope.
Well, Cruz.
Cruz is two.
Pitcher, starting pitcher.
Jared Triolo
Oh,
would be
okay.
the third. The whole pitching staff turned over. If you looked at the opening day roster for 2023, it is a horror show. So there's just only things to get excited about. Last thing I'll add on the Pirates, because we got so much more to talk about the Pirates as the season goes on, is that I have made a bet on the Pirates. I'm a
Oh God, here you go.
stone cold locked on the Pirates for them to win the division. Plus
Ugh.
650. Let's go. Put some cash down.
That's not.
Let's
I'll
ride
say
with
this. I'll say this. That's a much. I like those odds relative to it. You know, them possibly winning the division. You could sell me on that before you can sell me on the Steelers winning the division. I'll put it that way. That's probably going out on a limb, but I like those odds relative to the fact I think they could win the division. I think the Cubs and the Brewers, or especially the Cubs, are very good, but it's not like this division by any means is a lock. You know, there's no one in the division that's like, oh, there's, you know, no one that's going to be like, oh, they're a lock. There's a Dodgers or anything like that.
it.
I don't hate that bet.
Sure.
I don't hate that bet. I'll put it that way.
That's because it's a lock. You know, it's just like the same lock as having, you know, less than two people throw a pass in a football game. It's the same thing, just better odds.
Yeah, a little bit better odds.
So from the Pirates, let's move on to the Pens and the Olympics. So I really think from an Olympic hockey fan, they haven't really started yet. Those first few games were just kind of a teaser. It's really about to start now. But what's your initial thoughts on kind of how the Olympics have played out so far?
Yeah, pretty exactly like we had talked about. The one thing that's a little, well, I guess it's hard to really knock Sweden, but Sweden was essentially in a three-way tie, which is ironically is unfortunate for the U.S. Now they actually have a matchup where they'll probably have to play Sweden in the second round. But Canada, U.S. looking exactly as we expected. Canada dominant, 20-3 or 20 goals, 3 against in the first 3 games. I think France scored 2. I mean, you know, it could have been probably worse. So about what you would expect with Canada, their star power is unreal. The U.S. nothing to complain about through the first 3. So again, very similar to what we thought about or what we expected through these first 3 for both of them. They're clearly far and away the best 2 teams.
Yeah, you know, I hope it comes down to that game. So I think that's as a viewer, you know, I just want to see Canada versus U.S. in the gold medal game, and like that is going to be the must see television.
Yeah, and it should. There's some these I don't want to call them all-star because like in a way they are, but like this is well beyond all-star. But when you get these teams that are set up this way, like yes, Canada has some incredible top-end talent, but there's certain teams that they're just, no matter what they do, they're not going to be able to play with Canada or the U.S. But yeah, the U.S. might not have quite as much like star power, but they can play with Canada, and we saw it in the 4 nations. There's a certain level. The U.S. is certainly above it to where they can play with Canada. So that possible gold medal game would be incredible. To your point, I think it's going to happen, but let's hope it happens. It'll be fun too. Unfortunately, I think that the U.S. has to play Sweden. It'll be interesting seeing Raquel and Carlson against the U.S. That should be a really good game, assuming I think they play Latvia, which they should easily beat Latvia. So that could be a pretty interesting round 2 game for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And once the Pens come back and the NHL comes back, the trade deadline is just days after that. So that's kind of a lot of the discussion right now is kind of a blackout period for roster movement in the NHL. But the Pens, if they need help anywhere, it's on the back end. So what's your thoughts on the trade deadline?
Yeah, there was a report today. Yoey came out with a report, or he was cited saying that all of the talk around the NHL or in league circles is that it's going to be a D-man, that they're certainly, that may be their focus, which again, I think makes sense. I think you could say they overachieved for sure on the back end this year, which is great. It's why they're in the position they are, but I don't know that you want to bank on that. So I think that makes sense. I think that's where they should probably focus. Maybe you don't want to sell the farm for a top 2 D-man, but maybe a middle pairing type level defenseman would make a lot of sense for them. But yeah, that was the rumor that came out today, which again I think makes a lot of sense. They're not gonna get some huge. And they honestly they shouldn't be looking to make some huge addition at goalie with what they have coming up anyway. So I think D probably makes the most sense and would be attainable. So the rumor makes sense.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that's really the only move that they can kind of make. I feel like goalie's too hard to make that type of move, but that's probably the
Yeah.
spot where they
Yep.
really need to upgrade if they want to make a true run in the playoffs. But I think that's like just putting your chips on Skinner
Yeah.
or maybe get a
Yep.
little rookie lightning in a bottle from Sergey.
Again, and
So
it makes sense with the system. Like you bite the bullet for 1 year, you see how far Skinner can take you, and you're kind of set up, moving forward, starting next year even, where you can start bringing. They have two great prospects in goal, so it really wouldn't make sense to make a big splash there anyway.
yeah, use one of those third round picks you got for TJ Watt and go get a
Yeah, yeah,
defenseman.
yeah. Use it in hockey.
Absolutely. So our last of the four sports is Pitt. Pitt's definitely going to be in a little bit of a lull for us, just kind of the way the season is. So we'll go a little in and out, and might be kind of coming back to some topics that might happen a few weeks ago, just to rehash them. And this is one of them. Alan Green came out and had a pretty in depth letter to the Pitt fans. What was the initial take on that, Justin?
My first thought was, wow, I cannot wait to talk about attendance on the podcast. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So let's talk about attendance. We were thinking we were going to talk about this last week. We had only been negative about Pitt, so wanted Fitzgerald was perfect timing. Could we get something positive about Pitt? Some positive news. We knew we were going to talk about this. It needed to be addressed. I think there's a lot to bigger picture to take away from this. I do think it's so early with Alan Green. Like, I think anyone who has an opinion right now it's probably an opinion they want to have anyway on him so far. To take a step back even beyond that, I was surprised when they moved on from Heather Lyke. I think a lot of people were, unless you were really, really in the weeds and really, really knew what was going on. When she was brought in at a time where this is before NIL, and it was before NIL, and her big focus was the Olympic sports. The Olympic sports historically, and when I say I mean non-football and basketball, obviously, they've been pretty bad at Pitt, with a couple exceptions and some spots where they were decent in some of the sports. So that was her big focus. And again, I don't want to make this about Heather Lyke, but now looking back, a lot of the moves they made, a lot of the money they pushed towards that direction, it was almost like she got stuck doing that. And now it feels like they're trying to unravel that. So it feels like Green is trying to do some of that. The big rumor this week, and we'll go into attendance and the tarp and everything, which is the main storyline here. So I don't want to bury the lead. Track and field, the rumor is they're eliminating track and field. I think the bigger college football in general topic here is how much of this is coming, because I think a lot of schools are like, hey, look, I saw a report today, Alabama, their actual numbers came out. They're losing, and this isn't abnormal. They're losing money on and they're losing $1 million or more on every sport except for football and basketball. And they're still turning a profit of $32 million, I think, this year alone. So again, not abnormal. It's not like Alabama's a great example because they are who they are, but it's tough. These other sports, there's a huge difference, and there's a lot of conversations that are becoming, do schools does football and maybe basketball, do they break away? That's a whole bigger topic, but this is maybe a step in, Pitt, in my opinion, really focusing on what makes sense to focus on. And that's part of the reason why they brought Alan Green in, is he was going to chart the path with football, basketball, the moneymakers, and the NIL. So maybe this is a first step in that direction. But I think there is a bigger conversation in college sports in general. How much of this is coming where they're just going to need to cut sports? You have to pay for things somehow now that there's more costs associated with it. So how do you make the math work? So that's the first piece. I don't know if do you have any thoughts on that before we jump into the Acrisure stuff and the tarping?
No, I think all that stuff is not unique to Pitt. I think the tarping of the stadium is unique to Pitt, so we can get into that here in a second. But I think all the track and field aspects and the things of just kind of having fewer and fewer sports, that trend has been
Yeah.
on par well before
Yeah.
NIL.
Since Title
NIL
IX,
just
really.
exasperated it. Yeah. I think we're in the middle of the Olympics right now. I think everybody in the U.S. wants the U.S. to win as many golds as possible. So let's make NBC pay for these teams
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
those
Exactly.
aspects. Let's put it on
Yeah.
the TV contracts instead.
Yeah. So the main story out of this certainly was they're going to be tarping off sections in the upper deck of Acrisure. So it's going to take attendance from about 70,000 to around 51. Now, obviously, these aren't permanent tarps. So if like they play a Notre Dame or they play a West Virginia, they can certainly remove them. My again, this could be a whole show that we could do on not just attendance but like college sports in general. Pitt really, I mean, they have nothing to be ashamed of in the fact that they should really have a stadium of 40 to 50,000 students. There's
Yes.
nothing wrong with that. Now, the reason they don't, without getting too deep into this, they have a great deal with the city of Pittsburgh and the Steelers. They essentially have the opposite of the deal that Temple has in Philly. Like the ratio of what they pay versus what like a Temple does is kind of flipped. So it's almost one of those things where like money wise doesn't make sense for them. There's other reasons they can't move out of they can't have their stadium in a different spot, but they 51,000 is what they should be at anyway. It's kind of weird how they're doing it. There's like anything, you make a move like this, there's actual season ticket holders that are not happy because they're getting moved out of their sections. It's moving people into sections that are better seats and they have to pay a little bit more is a large part of it. But again, like their prices for season tickets relative to other schools is so much lower. So it's like, you want to top, you can't complain about everything. You want a top program, you want to generate money, you can't have it every way is really what it comes down to. This number makes more sense. I also think Narduzzi was on record maybe 5 years ago saying we can never do that because of recruiting. It doesn't matter anymore because you're paying the players anyway. That's the bigger draw. So it's no longer the main issue. If this was 5 years ago, it was never going to happen. I think it makes sense. Like I hate to say that, but this is a right amount of attendance for them anyway.
I think it makes a ton of sense. I think having fans in that lower bowl from a TV standpoint, from just an atmosphere standpoint.
Right.
I
Yep.
mean, we were at a game earlier this year, and it's there's just not enough people in that stadium most games for them to have concession stands open and
That's
all
and
these
that's why
things
they're
and all
yep.
that aspect. It's just how you would run a stadium. It just needs to be a smaller footprint, and I think it'll make it a better game day experience for Pitt fans in the long run too.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
know
I
I'm surprised
definitely
they
agree.
didn't leave out the 50-yard strip, in the upper deck and just kind of
Yeah,
tape off,
what you
kind of
just
other
said, I
sides
think
of
is
that.
the yeah. I thought the same thing, and it looks like on the message boards, that's why they did it was like the concessions, and there's some like actual logistics that go along with that, and like those upper decks and where you leave open, where you don't. And the bigger thing too, and I don't think people talk about this enough with Acrisure, the seats are bright, they're yellow, and they're individual seats. Look at any other college, well, not any other, but the vast majority of other college stadiums, they're bleachers. You compare schools of Pitt size, it doesn't look the same as when you're in individual seats and it spreads people out more. So it just like to your point, they also have the camera on the wrong side of the field. It's the wayside, which doesn't help. It makes sense to me. I think this is probably overdue, and I understand why they didn't do it in the past. It's not the concerns or the cons from before don't really exist as much now. So I think this is a good move.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see a Pitt game, shoulder to shoulder with fans again. So that'll be fun when it kind of comes down to it. So Justin, take us into our last segment here, the one that you were talking about at the top.
Yep. So this is a new segment. We're excited about this. We're gonna be doing a lot more. We'll still be doing nostalgia moments. We may even do both. Some shows, but we love drafting. Joe loves drafting. Joe will draft anything if you let Joe draft. So we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be adding in some drafts, some lists, depending on the topic. What makes more sense. And what we want is we want you, as viewers, to vote on, whose list or whose draft is better. And then there will, like I said, there will be a punishment. Joe is known for accidentally having half a beard, so we might be doing something like that at the end of this. But we'll add up the standings, based on, in order to vote, you got to comment in the comment section, and or on social media, and that we'll count that as a vote. And then we'll just keep it standing. And then at the end of probably the end of the summer, whoever loses, again, we haven't decided officially a punishment, but probably we'll have to do a show with half a beard, as like I said, as Joe is known to do, because he always loses bets against me. Just to jump in at first, the first one we figured we keep it pretty simple. We're gonna do a 4-round draft of our favorite sports movies. Joe, do you want to take the first? You can pick. Do you want the first pick, or do you want the snake at the end of the first round?
I'll go first.
All right.
I'll go right off the cuff. I think there's plenty of movies to be had here, but there is one that I've watched more than any other, and it is the most quotable for me, and that is Remember the Titans.
I shouldn't have let you pick. I shouldn't have let you go first. That's a good pick. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have that first. Not that I want to be, complimenting your list, but I think you have to go with Remember the Titans. Did hurt me a little bit to learn the real story, and things aren't quite Hollywood or quite as Hollywood as you think. But that movie's just, I think what makes that movie so watchable is it's like there's certain sports movies that are deep and they're maybe not as watchable. Like you could turn Remember the Titans on with like the meaning and the deepness to it, and it's still like you can watch it. So I think that's an obvious pick at one. I'm gonna go. So you took my number one. I'm going to go a little off the board. I'm going to go, this might not be viewed as great. I'm going to go Sandlot, number 2. Again, similar type of, for me, super watchable, like Americana. I feel like we lived this movie growing up pretty much.
That was going to be my next pick if it was going to come back to me. So.
Yeah, so that's going to be my number 2. So to start the second round, I'll draft again. This could be, I'm going to go Friday Night Lights. This is more one I think will be higher on my list than some other lists. Incredible soundtrack, Explosions in the Sky, and that movie. I read the book too growing up, and they did a really good job. The ending's a little bit different. That's just, again, just perfect, example of, certainly in Texas, high school football. So that's a top 3 for me.
Now, do you get negative points because the TV show was better than the movie?
Ooh, I had this same conversation today. I don't know if I can go that far, and I still can't get over Matt Saracen's throwing motion. It still drives me insane. He just was not believable as a quarterback. But yeah, the show was incredible. I love that. I've watched that multiple times the whole way through.
Yeah, I think for mine, I got the wraparound here. I was debating kind of from some sports movies, what's the best way to kind of compile the team. I'm going to try to go different sports if I can as I go down the line. So my next one here is going to be Miracle. I think Miracle was a phenomenal movie. So I think Remember the Titans, Miracle, top 2. It's going to be a tough list to beat when it comes down to it. We'll go number 3, coming back around. I wish I probably would have wrote some more down. I was really hoping Sandlot was going to be there. I'm going to break what I was just going to say. So I went football, hockey, baseball has the most classic movies. I'm going to stay in the baseball aspect, go Field of Dreams, 3.
I talked about this one today too. It's funny. We were considering doing like a most overrated list, and I would have probably had Field of Dreams on most overrated until I watched it again about a year ago. It hits way different when you're older. Like when you're younger, I was like, there's not a baseball when you're younger. Way different movie when you watch it again when you're older. So I think it's a good pick. I got the wraparound here. I really like that one slot. That's the one with the wraparound in the second and third is a good slot. I'm going to go Varsity Blues here. So I'm going to go with the West Canaan Coyotes. As
no
Joe
one's
knows,
alive from that movie anymore.
I know both quarterbacks are gone. James Vanderbeek this week, which is pretty rough. But yeah, that movie. So my justification with that one is it's a It's a comedy movie, but I thought that they did a really good job of like the football in that was good. They did a good job of just portraying high school football in general. I think that's an underrated movie.
Or do you just like whipped cream? Where do you land there?
Not a bad scene. Not gonna lie, not a bad scene. This is tough because I've got a lot here in like the same tier. It's just like, do you go classic or do you go? I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Rudy. I
Oh,
can't do a sports movie list and just not name it. Again, I was talking to someone today and they're like, I don't know. I'm like, this might be one where you were talking about, we were talking about like movies that are, deeper. It is definitely deeper. It can be a little bit of a heavy watch, but I just don't think I could do this list and not do Rudy.
hey, good one. So I'm gonna wrap up our draft. You said you picked the movie earlier on because of a soundtrack. I'm gonna one up the soundtrack, so you can just knock that out the list. If you're thinking at home,
Well, I think I
I
know where you're
started
going.
with a football movie. I
Yep,
moved to
I know where you're
hockey.
going.
I went to baseball. I'm gonna wrap with basketball. And the best soundtrack is Space Jam from
I knew
basketball.
you were. As soon as you said soundtrack, I remember you had the CD.
Oh yeah, I mean it literally you could listen to that one from start to finish. I'm gonna go try to find that CD too. My car still plays CDs, so I think I'm gonna make that my
Oh,
soundtrack as I
well,
go around.
you got the CDs, I got the DVDs, so we're set, right?
Yeah,
All right. Well, that was fun. We'll do a graphic and I'll post that. And like I said, we can vote online. But we'll be doing more of these. We'll be doing lists, things like this to kind of mix things up.
absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for listening. If you're still listening now, you're one of the real ones. So if you haven't, remember to like and subscribe. But we'll catch you next Wednesday.
All right. See you later.